Okay, what we're talking about tonight, okay, is there Halachic Bill of Rights? So there's really two parts of what I want to deal with here. One is our relationship to the values in the world around us, in the sense that we in Canada, and by extension the United States, and basically in Western society, we now have a set of values that is considered to be the values that we abide by in our society.
Whether or not they're good values.
That's part of the issue, because in many ways we have connected to those values, and in many ways we also look upon those values in many ways as good values and so forth. The truth is, one of the questions is, how do they really relate to Torah values? And it becomes very in a certain way problematic within the Jewish world, because we find confusion in terms of how we relate with those values because of their contradiction. And for example, I remember years ago I gave a shir, and I just mentioned it in passing, the idea of freedom of religion. I basically said, do you think that halacha thinks of freedom of religion? And there was a person at the shir who basically, of course it does. Now this was a guy who went through Jewish education. He was, I think he went to Orchaim or whatever. I mean, I'm not being critical of Orchaim, but the point is, of course. Now the truth is because we as Jews have benefited from freedom of religion, right? We can't just knock freedom of religion and say, hey, what are you talking about freedom of religion? We are able to live in America because of freedom of religion. We've been able to build yeshivot because of freedom of religion. Okay. At the same point in time, if we were building a halachic country, could we accept freedom of religion? Right? The point is, what's even more interesting about is one of the great praises people love to say about Eretz Yisrael is that
you can have your religion.
You can have your freedom of religion. Right? Right? We have...
Except there's not.
What?
Except that it's not.
Well,
you can practice. There's not freedom.
Well, the point is...
Not in the same way that we define it in North America.
Okay, but the fact is yes, you can have the Al-Aqsa mosque. You can have, you know, it's every religion is allowed their own place in Eretz Yisrael.
Okay.
Okay, so the point is, now you're getting into further details where it might be of greater freedom in America than in Israel, but that's further. So one issue is how do we really relate to Western ethics? Because Western ethics really are positive to us, and we work with it. But there's another issue, and that is the starting issue of what I talked about in the Halachic Bill of Rights. What's the opening statement, not the Bill of Rights, but the Declaration of Independence?
We the people.
Right, we the people, okay? And we argue about the inalienable right bestowed upon us by the Creator towards life, liberty, and happiness.
And the happiness of pursuit.
Pursuit of happiness. The fact is we talk about the right of the individual. The right of the individual to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Which means the starting point of life is the human being has a right. Right? We can do certain things and so forth. The point is, do we? And furthermore, where does that come from? This idea is, it says it's bestowed upon us by the Creator. From where? What does that mean? Okay.
Is there something in Torah that says that the founding fathers derived that and put their John Hancock on it?
That's going to be our question. Does Judaism believe in a right of an individual to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness? Okay, so that's really what I'm getting at, is that the question of the Halachic Bill of Rights is basically, how does Torah look at the right of the individual?
Okay, but wait a minute. It depends on how you define the pursuit of happiness. Pursuit of happiness could be serving Hashem, in which case, yeah, you got that right.
Okay, so what you're saying is an answer
What's
is.
a right? It means you deserve something?
So that's another question as
That's another
well.
question.
That's another question. What exactly do we mean by? But in other words, there's this statement that exists in secular values. Okay. What does that statement mean? Okay. Then the question is what does that statement mean within Torah? Okay. Now, in the statement of the Declaration is stated as is bestowed upon by the Creator, which is one of the issues that exists in terms of religion in the United States, because it seems that the founding fathers in America were religious people, and they believed that their country was founded on some understanding of a deity. The point is, though, in our world today, the whole argument of church and state calls upon for a separation between church and state, which means people really having problems. So the fact is that when you have the Pledge of Allegiance, you say, under God,
One
everyone
nation
goes
under
crazy
God.
about that, because the point
Indivisible.
is it's supposed to have no real aspect of religion. Well, if you're not supposed to have any aspect of religion, why do you say bestowed upon by the Creator? The point is, the secularists, what does a secularist mean when we say we have rights? Okay, Richard Dawkins, when he's an atheist, he'll sit there and say human beings have rights. Why? What rights do you have? That's really what we're getting at over here when we talk about Halachic Bill of Rights. The question, what is a right? The question is, you're saying, what is the pursuit of happiness? But the question is that in a certain way, what is that original relationship of, or not even the relationship, what does it mean to look at God in the creating of a human being? What's the status of the human being in terms of what do I do now? In other words, really what occurs is when they say what was happening at the Declaration of Independence was when the human being was created, basically said, okay, I've created you. I'm turning the key on the thing. Now go. Now what are you going to do when you go? What happens at that point in time? The point is they're saying that you have a right to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. Was basically saying, okay, go now, and your goal is going to be happiness, whatever way you want to define happiness, and so forth. But the point is that it starts getting people just going. What does that mean in terms of God creating the human being? What is that initial point of what the human being is about? Now, if you say the human being is basically, the human being's happiness is going to be by serving God, relating to God, then the human being would be driven to have some type of connection with God. So that would be great.
Didn't
Okay?
you define it as a drive in the past?
What?
When you talked about drives, didn't
Yes,
you
we've
define
said
it?
that they've said that but there's other drives which are not considered
In competition, for
in
example.
competition. And then we talked about different types of drives, and where some drives are appropriate and some drives are not appropriate. Okay, you have and then it comes into the issue where you have a drive for hunger, but if you eat something not kosher, it's not acceptable, and so forth. But the point is that you're getting into the situation of what do you deal with in terms of God's laws and God's commands and so forth. But the starting point is that mechanism of the human being. And the starting point is this idea of a right. I have a right to a pursuit of happiness. Well, maybe you don't. Okay, who says you do?
Who says we have a right to anything?
Right. So the point is that then it comes to the issue, what do you mean by a right? It becomes an issue where you may want it, it may be a desire, but a right seems to impose something upon others. Okay? The point is that you talk about it now in terms of the whole discussions about the right to Medicare, right?
It has to be communal consent in some way.
Well, the point is a right seems to say I have the a right means that I can now does it mean I can do this, okay, and you can't stop me, or does it mean I am entitled to something from you.
It seems more entitlement, because
What?
the other one, you would say, then what is the need of laws if I have rights? I should be able to do whatever I wish,
Right.
right? So therefore you have laws that are basically your fences.
So what's significant is starting off with what really, why did, let's say, the Declaration of Independence begin with rights? So what were they really responding to when they talked in terms
England.
of rights? And what were they doing?
Oppression from afar,
They're basically
taxation
saying,
without representation.
what was saying is that the world of rights began with the perception that you did not have rights. Okay, and that was the world of medieval Europe. Okay, you were basically a vassal to your lord. Okay, and then a vassal to the king and so
But
forth.
And you didn't have
they
rights
allowed-
to land, and you didn't have rights to.
Right.
They had slavery.
In a
Pardon?
certain
Yeah.
level, serfdom was slavery and so forth.
Right.
So the point is
No, but I'm saying, in America, after the Declaration of Independence,
Oh, was
there
that-
was slavery.
right, because when
Correct.
they say all men are
These
created
people had
equal,
no-
No, they're not.
they weren't, all men
How
were
many
created equal, but at
created
the
equal
same
as long
point
as
in
they got
time,
the right color?
yeah, at the same point in time, right there it said, and when we do the census, we'll count every black person as 2/3 of a person or whatever. But the point is that
No
that,
slave has liberty, no slave has.
right. So therefore, the
ability
statement,
to pursue.
and that's exactly what had to happen.
Until
We had to say,
1865.
hey, when we said all people were created equal, we meant all people. And then the equal
Including
right-
women.
Well, that's the question today about the Equal Rights Amendment, where people are saying, hey, we need to state this about women. They're also rights, and other people are saying, no, they really are equal anyways.
But it makes the Declaration a farce.
By the way, that was an argument that has existed over the centuries. That when they say all men are created equal, they didn't really mean it, because George Washington was a slave owner. Thomas Jefferson was a slave owner. The point is they
But
didn't mean it.
maybe
All
you
men of
can't
Maine.
mean it.
So were
What?
many Jews.
Maybe it's impossible to mean it.
Well,
when human beings talk about
You
human
think Whoopi
rights.
Goldberg got her
You know,
last name
because
generations
what you're
ago?
getting at is in the world. See, what you're dealing with right now is what you would say is the falsity of these statements, or the farce of these statements, in the sense that you're dealing with what do these statements really mean, and what's equality, and so forth and so forth. I mean, you look at the let's say American presidential, let's say the Democratic nominees, right? So
Caucuses?
the truth is, I looked up something. There was
Caucasians.
a website that I took a fast look at. Okay, it was a fast look at on the wealth of all the Democratic people running for president.
And
Okay, so there's an interesting.
Isn't it skewed a little bit because it includes Bloomberg?
Well, he is the wealthiest person running, but
Yes, he can
but
buy
you
everybody
look at these statements and so forth, and
I don't think Bernie Sanders is poor somehow.
okay, so Bernie Sanders is low down on the list.
Top.
He's only worth $2.5 million.
That's nothing.
Okay,
That's the price of my house plus my neighbors.
right. Elizabeth Warren, her and her husband are worth, I think, 12 million. Okay, Steyer is worth $1 billion. These are the Democratic, no, Democratic right for the Democratic idea. You're right. The point is that, well, what does this mean? Everyone's talking about, like Bernie Sanders being a socialist. Well, he's not.
Yeah, real social. It sounds pretty capitalistic to me.
Yeah. So he's a democratic socialist, and of course, in Trump, how much is Trump worth?
Oh, please.
Well, we don't know.
We're not going there. Yeah, and you will never know.
Well,
we mean-
he's estimated at 3.5 billion.
Billion?
Billion.
Billion.
When you take a few of his
Okay,
competitors,
and then there's Mike Bloomberg.
Pence and
So how much do you think Blake Bloomberg's worth?
Does Trump give charity?
13.6.
Yeah, he has a Trump. What? How much?
I think it was 13.6 billion.
Who? Bloomberg?
You're kidding.
Somebody has to be, I guess.
That seems wrong.
The figure that I heard was 53.6
It
billion.
really doesn't make a difference.
No. The
You
point
can't
is-
spend it all in one place.
Just like when it's cold, doesn't matter if it's -5 or -25. It's cold.
Okay,
Yeah.
but my point
Well,
is,
yeah,
the
where's
point is you get into these issues of equality. On the other hand, you do take the aspect of oppression. Communism basically said, right? Well, you should if you want like if you want to be a violinist, but you're really good in physics, what happens in a communist country? Basically, you're told, okay, you're going to be a physicist. I know how much you like violin. In America, you become a violinist even if you have a tremendous propensity to physics. In a more communist country, that comes down to the aspect of what's
So
a
the
right.
Halacha is more communist than.
Why?
We haven't got there
Well,
yet.
let's say someone asked
We're
you
getting
a halachic question and said, I am a cancer researcher. I'm very close to finding a cure to this horrible cancer, but I'm not happy. And someone else will have to do this. I'm going to quit my job as a researcher and go be happy. And if they ask this as a halachic question, I could see someone saying to them, no? Wouldn't someone say to them, you have an obligation to, you have a skill God gave you, you have an obligation.
You have to use it for the good of the state.
Yeah. Couldn't that be an answer if someone asked
It
that?
could be, but is it a halachic answer?
I don't know.
That's a good question, because that gets into the issue of rights. That gets to the issue of what your
Yeah,
idea is.
that's what I'm asking.
Point the point is that's where halacha comes in terms of what your obligations are. If you have knowledge of medicine, then you have to act upon it. So okay, but at the same point in time, there's a famous story with the Vilna Gaon. Vilna Gaon studied every form of secular studies. Okay, the Vilna Gaon, quote unquote, if everyone talks about modern orthodoxy and the study of secular studies, the Vilna Gaon felt that anything you are lacking in secular studies, you're lacking 20 times in Torah. So he believed that you really had to know secular knowledge. Now, was he up on Plato? I don't think so. I think he's talking much more concrete secular knowledge. Okay, but the fact is he knew things and so forth. However, there's one area of secular studies that he did not complete. That was the study of medicine. And the argument is, why did he not complete his study of medicine?
Because he fainted when he saw blood.
Good answer. Don't think it was the right
That was not the Vilna Gaon. No, but the fact is because he said that if I completed my study of medicine, I would have an obligation to treat everyone, okay? And I'd never be able to learn Torah because I'd be so obligated to take care of people
Well
if they came
put.
to me that.
Yeah.
And the fact is he made a decision not to complete his studies of medicine, so he could be fully involved in the studies of Torah. Now the point is, though, is that at that point in time he was doing something else which he felt was obligatory also in terms of Limud Torah. It also had significance and so forth. But the point is that it's well known that the Rambam, right, basically said, I don't have time to learn because I have to do medicine, because he had to treat everyone who came to him. So he was limited in what he could do. The point is you're raising a real tough question. Part of that question is that in the Vilna Gaon's case, he could take, I have an obligation of Limud Torah over my obligation to take care of medicine. But now he's talking in terms of the imposition of Torah on his own personality or his own interests and so forth. But what you're raising is the question about your own interests. I want to do something. Where does that sound with the idea? The idea of starting with rights is you usually talk in terms of rights because there's something limiting your rights. So when America opened up when the Declaration opens up with rights, it's basically saying, is there something limiting your rights? Okay, so they said, yes, in our world, we need to talk in terms of rights because we are fighting against rights. But then they said, and where do these rights come from? They're bestowed from the Creator. So they had to have some basis for these rights. And then it comes down to, what are these rights? Is it just your interests? It's just what you want to do? And by the way, you're seeing it nowadays in terms of the extension of rights. The truth is that the LGBTQ community is arguing my rights. I have a right to do this. And that extends from the North American idea that unless you're going to hurt someone, you have a right to do anything. Okay?
What about a right for housing?
What?
What about a right for housing?
So the point is, where do you
Or
define
food,
rights?
or clothing.
Yeah, the fact is what you're now saying is not just the idea that I have a right to do anything. It's now saying you have, and you, the community, has to serve. In other words, that's where it gets into an issue of rights versus a right being a right. Then the right is not just my right to do whatever I want to do. It becomes it's a right that allows me to demand of the other. So we've moved from different aspects of rights here. There's one idea of right basically being, right, I can do what I want to do. Okay, and basically George Washington said, listen, if I want to go fishing in that pond, nothing should be able to stop me. However, then there's another thing to sit there and say, I have a right to eat. Okay, and that really comes about to say then the community has an obligation to take care of right. That's where you get into issues in terms of universal Medicare. When they talk in terms of a right to Medicare, it's that I have a right that people should take care of me. Okay, so that becomes a further issue.
That is in Torah.
Okay, so the point is the point is the way it's framed is right. What you're now getting into, and this is where it becomes the idea, is that there's a difference between a simple right, which means I should be able to do what I want to do, to the creation of an obligation on society towards the individual. This is one of the interesting aspects of Torah. Torah does not talk in terms of rights in the halachic system. Torah talks in terms of the obligations of the community to the individual. And you see that in terms of the way it phrases things. Okay, it does not say to the person, you have a right to, its original statement is not you have a right to be taken care of and to food. Okay, you have a right to be fed. What it says is the society has an obligation to the poor person to make sure that the poor person is being fed. It's a different statement. And that's a very big statement, because I find this also in terms of Medicare. Did some work on the halachic understanding of Medicare. In Europe, okay, you know, everyone talks about let's say the Vad Hayir, or they talk about the Chevra Kadisha, or you talk about the Bikur Cholim Committee. The fact is when we had Jewish independent communities in Europe, right? The government basically said, you guys go take care of yourself. Okay? What taxation was in Europe was the government said, okay, we want this amount of money from the Jewish community. Then the Jewish community had to raise that money, and then it had to create its own legal system. So therefore the Bezdin really worked, because if you had Jews having a conflict, a dispute, they had to go to the Bezdin. It was the only time you went to the secular court was when you were in dispute with a non-Jew. Okay, which basically wasn't too fair anyways. But the point is that you had a Jewish court or whatever. But the fact is the Bikur Cholim Committee was really an extension of the Jewish community's obligation to take care of the poor, of people who were ill. Now, that system was not totally like OHIP socialized. The fact is people were expected to pay their doctors, and only if the doctor couldn't be paid, but then it became a communal obligation. And then the issue arose in terms of the place of the individual in covering their needs versus the idea of the community. But the community, when it defined charity, it defined it as an obligation on the community. In Christian thought, if you look in terms of charity, it comes from your own personal feeling of I want to help out someone else. If you look in terms of halacha, it comes from an obligation you have to the other. And it doesn't necessarily come from your feeling of I want to help out. It comes from an idea that you are obligated to help out.
But you know,
Well, that's more like balishma.
you know that if you're obligated, that every other Jew is obligated as well, so it will come to you as well.
So there's much more of a communal aspect in the Jewish community. Now this is
It's
something.
more than communal, it's a brotherhood because
So Kol Yisrael Raven,
it's not as if there's
Raven's
10
all that.
people who are giving and
right?
10
Because
people
Kol
who are-
Yisrael Raven Zelazah,
Yeah.
which creates a sense of obligation. But the point is that you're looking. That's the way people talk, and people talk about this. There's a lot of articles out there that Jews don't speak in terms of rights; they speak in terms of duties, because that's our
But
Halachic system.
what about the brachas in the morning? That seems to suggest rights. If we thank God for something, it means that it's coming to us.
Why?
We're thanking God
Why?
for not being slaves. We're thanking God.
Why? Why does it mean it's coming to us? We thank Him. If someone gives
No,
you.
I don't mean coming to
Just-
us in terms of deserve. I mean that you don't say thank you for something you don't have.
Okay, so the fact is that leads to the fact that there's a difference between rights or having something. Rights meaning that I am entitled to this. See,
But the brachas seem to suggest that you're entitled
no,
to
it doesn't.
Well, why would we be able to say thank you for that I'm not a slave, or thank you for giving me everything I need, unless it was ours?
Yeah, so therefore, that's true. But the point is that thank you for not being a slave doesn't mean I'm entitled not to be a slave. That's the way it's made. Right.
That's my current status.
It's my current
Yeah.
status.
And if I was a slave,
Well, and
I wouldn't be saying that.
Right.
if you become a slave, you don't say that bracha?
No.
How can you? If I do I
It would
say
be
the,
levat halah, literally.
Right.
do I say the brachas for that the women say, or do I say the brachas that the men say? I don't say both.
Yeah, and that's
But
and
some
fork
brachas
in that
define
road.
the reality, like Shasali Kol Sarki.
so the point is
You
that,
make an assumption that
therefore
it's not-
therefore what you're doing is you're jumping ahead to understand, and therefore you get people saying that everything you have to recognize that God really knows what's best for you. So then you're making religious statements. You're making theological statements that by definition, even though I may not understand it, I have what I need. Okay, that's a theological statement.
Yeah.
Okay, so the point is that something that's in your conscience, but it's not an idea that I have a right to it. See, the point is on the other hand, you're saying something interesting, because the fact is that if a Kodesh Baruch Hu is a Tov Meitiv, we basically also accept the fact that God always has our best interest in His mind, and therefore we will have what we need. But the point is that, see, the key term here is right. Right implying that this is something that is by definition I'm entitled to. Now, then it comes into the issue is whether the entitlement is only in terms of myself, I'm entitled to do this, or is the entitlement then extend to, and I have a right because of my entitlement to impose upon the community to do things for me. So what we see in terms of people talking in terms of rights, a lot of time people talking in terms of rights was I had the right to do something if I wanted to do it. I wanted to be a violinist, so I could be a violinist. But it doesn't mean that society has to help me achieve that goal. Then it becomes an extension of the concept of rights, which says that I have a right to impose upon society. That's a further definition of right. The point is that what you're looking at in terms of stating the idea of a Halachic Bill of Rights, is there a concept of is a human being by right, endowed with the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, right? That comes down to an issue of how is the human being created within the divine system in terms of his entitlements. Okay? Now, by definition, once HaKadosh Baruch Hu creates a halachic order, even in giving the Noachide laws, he's basically said right away to Adam and Chava in saying, don't eat from the Eitz Hadas Tov Ra. He was already saying, I am limiting what you are able to do. Okay? I'm saying you cannot eat from that tree. So therefore, what God is already stating is he can create restrictions. Okay? Now, did Adam and Chava have any rights or so forth? Well, did he have any obligations? So this is where it starts to get interesting. The point is Adam and Chava were created by God. So the point is do you have a right? Okay? Does God have to take care of you? Now, it's very interesting because in the world, let's say, of parenting, okay, it's an interesting issue in terms of parenting. If you have a child, do you have an obligation to that child?
An obligation to
What?
educate them, to give them Torah
So there's-
education.
To teach them to swim.
So the point is, there's obligation. Does the child have a right to parents? So in our world today,
Yeah.
people will say, you created me, so feed me.
Mhm.
Right? I didn't ask to be born.
There are children who sue their parents.
Right. Okay, because you created me. Does a child have a right to be taken? So the truth is, it becomes an issue of whether a parent what the parental obligation is to the child, but does the child have that right? Okay. Now the point is, you see what I'm getting at is this idea of rights does it mean I can do whatever I want to do? Well, once the HaKadosh Baruch Hu creates a Noachide code, he's basically saying, no, you can't do whatever you want to do. Okay? Now, do I have a right to okay, what rights do I have? So therefore, there's got to be certain things I'm allowed to do, certain things I'm not allowed to do. Okay, certain things where it becomes I'm allowed to do, it means I can make a decision to do these things. The other side to the coin is then can I impose upon others to assist me in achieving my goal? That's where you get into the issue of rights. So the question exists in terms of things like freedom of religion, freedom of speech. All these matters are the fact that you should have that within our system, it's it's not a right in terms of saying you have an obligation, you have to assist me, but it's saying I can do these things. I can talk. I should be allowed to voice my opinions. I should be allowed to believe anything I want to believe in our society, and our society then says, well, maybe there might be a restriction on that. Okay, so in freedom of speech, you can basically have freedom of speech, but you can't yell fire in a crowded building. So there's certain limitations on it. The point is the question is there Halachic Bill of Rights, which means does halacha accept the idea of rights? And the point is what's interesting is that for sure halacha is talking about obligations. So in terms of
it gets complicated between what is a right and what is an entitlement.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
There's
Because
a
you
li-
look at something like inheritance.
yes.
I'm entitled to that, but do I have a right to it?
That's a further thing. The truth of the matter is, you see that issue, by the way, in terms of tzedakah. Okay, is a person has an obligation to give tzedakah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, if a person's an ani who's entitled to tzedakah, and that person over there has to give tzedakah, can I go in and take the money from
Okay,
him?
yeah,
Right? Okay. Now the truth is, the bezdin could. Okay, if you didn't pay your taxes, and part of your taxes was that you had to give to the Vadat Tzedakah, okay, because the community had obligations to give certain tzedakah to Aniyim. Okay, if you didn't pay your taxes, the bezdin can go in and say, okay, we're taking this, cover your taxes, i.e. that's to give to poor people. But can a poor person walk into your door and take that money? No, because they don't have that right. Okay, now so the point is, it becomes much more of an issue of what really are rights, what are entitlements, what are legal entitlements that you can act upon. But the same thing applies in terms of communal obligations. Okay, it might be the community has an obligation to supply medical assistance to people in necessity, but that would be defined as the obligation of the community, not in terms of rights.
Okay, so
Okay,
going
so-
forward now, where are you leading us with this?
Okay, so the point is,
We
is
figured
that,
out the question.
okay, so now the point is, what does Judaism think in terms of at that starting point? So the first thing you would think in terms of the relationship of the human being to God, i.e., when Adam and Chava stood before God, what were their rights, what were their obligations, and so forth. So the first obligation everyone thinks about is the first rule: don't eat from the Eitz Hadas Tov Ra. Right? Now, there's also the Noahide commands, as the Rambam says, 6 of the commands were given to Adam, and the 7th one was given to Noah. But the point was, there were commands. So we always think in terms of a Kodesh Baruch Hu giving commands, which means people have obligations. Now, what happened in terms of development of American society or the emancipation is that the world was basically built around the idea of obligations. You basically it was the imposition of the ruling authorities upon the people. That's why people talked in terms of rights. But at the point in time, in terms of the start of the world, Kodesh Baruch Hu created the world. It was his world. He had the right to make laws in this world, and he created obligations upon the people. At this point in time, what existed with the absence of these obligations? Did Adam and Chava have a right? Well, basically, Adam and Chava could do what they want to do, right? If God didn't say you can't do it, then they could do what they want to do. But on the other hand, did they have any type of right to say, and God, you should be doing this? So that seems not that way. But there's an interesting other side to this, okay? Okay, and that interesting other side is there anything that sort of motivates you in terms of rights? So there's an interesting Meshech Chachma, okay, which throws a certain, idea into this whole concept. Adam and Chava, he argues that Adam and Chava, before they were told not to eat the Eitz Hadas Tov Ra, they had another mitzvah given to them first. And what the mitzvah was before the Eitz Hadas Tov Ra? Mikol Eitz Hagan Ochel Tochel. From all the fruits of the tree, you shall eat. But for the Eitz Hadas, you couldn't eat. So the NISHMA Chabura points out that there really was first a positive mitzvah. Okay, and he points out, and then he goes on to say, and the fact that Chava was not aware of this positive mitzvah caused the problem. This is why she didn't take the love as seriously as she should have. Okay, because what he said was what happened is that it becomes a new obligation. The fact is that being told that from all the trees you shouldn't eat, what's the new obligation? So we have a Gemara that tells us that one of the questions that the Kodesh Baruch Hu will ask us at the end of life is, right? Did you enjoy everything?
Were you the best you?
Well, but we're not. Did you enjoy the
life I gave you?
Did you enjoy the things that you could enjoy? Right? Okay, you are evaluated also on, did you pursue happiness? Now, is that a right to pursuit of happiness? It seems to be what the NISHMA Chabura is developing here is an obligation to pursue happiness. Now this is where it gets interesting in terms of this perspective of what I'm trying to say. Kadosh Baruch Hu created human beings. So the point is, in the Kadosh Baruch Hu creating human beings, what's the underlying purpose of the human being? Okay? So the point is that Kadosh Baruch Hu had a purpose in creating human beings. Now, in the creation of human beings, does that mean basically you're created to do whatever you want to do? Okay? Does it mean, hey, listen, I created you, I'm leaving you, you go have fun. You do whatever you want to do. Okay? Okay, that's one way of understanding a right. What it seems in the Meshech Chachma is that if you have a purpose, it has to be something that the way God created you is with a purpose. Okay? We are given drives, we are given things we enjoy, we are given our personalities because that's the way God has created us. And therefore we have a perception that there is benefit or there is purpose in doing what God wants us to do in terms of being ourselves. As you said, being the best person you can be. The point is,
using the tools that were made available and the skills that
right.
were
Which
ultimately
means,
developed
which also,
in the service of God.
Well, I'm not getting.
You're not there yet.
I'm not talking in terms of the service of God.
Mm-hmm.
I'm talking in terms of God's purpose for us. Okay. The point is that we are created with a purpose, and that purpose is also tied to our own personalities. Okay. God did not just say something blanket to all individuals. Here's your obligation. Do this. Don't do this. Do this. Don't do this. God basically said you're a human being. Mm-hmm. Now, determine what is your best way of living. How should you live? Now, He's also going to give us rules. He gave us the Noahide rules, mm-hmm. and then to the Jewish people He gave the Torah and so forth. But the point is He also gave us our own personalities. The only thing is, from a Torah perspective, it's not that He just gave us rights, He gave us a purpose to our being. Mm-hmm. And that involves being in touch with who we are and how we can best actualize who we are. Okay? So what happens is, the way I understand what the Meshech Chachma is saying, is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, listen, I created this place, and you should act upon it. Mekol eitz hagan ochel tochel. You can eat whatever you want. You like apples, eat apples. You like oranges, eat oranges. Right? I'm not telling you to eat this or to eat that. I'm telling you, you can, and then follow yourself and work, and then take it to where you have to go. What is your purpose in life? I'm going to give you a restriction. You can't eat from the eitz hadas tovara. That's a limitation. But the fact is, I'm not just giving you the right to do whatever you want. I'm saying that there is purpose in life, and you have to look into yourself to find a way of actualizing that. And in that regard, and this is where it gets into what Naomi was saying before, it's not just the actualization of you as an individual, it's the actualization of you as an individual within the community. So the point is, if you look at the Jewish development of community, mm-hmm. there is a value to the individual. Okay, chayecha kodem, your life comes first, mm-hmm. and then you also have to think in terms of the development of the nation and humanity. And it's interesting in terms of the way that the Torah develops concentric circles. There's the idea of you take care of yourself. Your next obligation is isha kagufo, your wife is like yourself. Then the next thing is to your family. Your first obligation is to family. Then your obligation is to community. Then your obligation is to Klal Yisrael. Then your obligation is to humanity. Point is, in terms of figuring out what the best way of developing is, but it's a different. What I'm trying to say is that in a certain way it's an obligation, but it's not the same type of obligation of imposition where you have no consideration in that obligation. Okay, it's not the communist telling you you're good at physics, you have to be a physicist. It's the fact that you are you, and you are supposed to look into yourself to figure out what you should be doing within the broader perspective of humanity, within the broader perspective of the divine order. The point is that in a certain way, it's not just the right, it's a recognition of your responsibility to self. The recognition that you have to follow through on what is good for you. So when the Kodesh Baruch Hu says, Mikol Eitz Hagan Ochel Tochel, means listen, it's there for you to use. It's there for you to act upon. It's there for you to make the world as good a place as you can make it. But the point is yes, there is a certain sense of obligation from that, and it's a mitzvah to say. Okay, it's somewhat of a mitzvah to say, but at the same point in time, it reflects your own individuality in terms of developing your sense. So the point is that it's not real. I don't think it's really like the term right in our world today, because the right in our world today is really a secular idea. You can do whatever you want to do. Okay? The point is, and then you get issues that I'm entitled to impose on others. And the reason they define it like that is because they don't want to use the word obligation. So I have a right to Medicare. No, what you're really arguing for is the other guy has an obligation to provide Medicare for me, but we're not going to define it that way because I want to define it in terms of my rights. But the point is, from a halachic perspective, there's a greater understanding that the starting point is not just simply a right, it's the fact that the Kodesh Baruch Hu has created you with a purpose. And that purpose involves your own pursuit of happiness. So or your own pursuit of what's good. Okay, and what you said before in terms of Tov V'Ameitiv, the fact is there's an idea of Yiddu as Hashem B'Simcha implies the fact that there's an idea of purpose in reaching a certain goal. And that goal does involve happiness. The pursuit of happiness is not just a right, it is an aspect of some type of understanding of how why God created human beings in terms of, as we said, God created human beings because he was a Tov V'Ameitiv. He wanted to allow human beings to reach a certain goal, a certain ideal. So the point is that what comes about is a very different understanding. Now this takes it to another understanding in terms of what we mean by Bill of Rights. So let's say, for example, this idea of freedom of speech, right? Do you have freedom of speech, right? So the fact is that yes, I have an obligation to talk. I'm a koyach hadibur, right? The human being is defined by the koyach hadibur. So the point is speaking is very much part of one of the things to be a human being. Mm-hmm. What comes about with the idea of speech is using it correctly. Okay? The problem with freedom of speech is I just have a right to talk is that I can say any stupid idea. The point is, if you look at the halachas in terms
but you've
of
covered all of those things in your words from the Meshech Chochmah, where
right.
he starts off.
Right.
He says you have every tree here,
right.
but you have to limit somewhere. It's like being ethical, using what we're doing with DNA. And we have everything's open to us, but it doesn't mean that we we do something to create something a selection process.
And therefore you have to use it with your mind and take it to the next step.
Right.
So I also apply this to freedom of religion, for example. Okay, there is a Jewish concept of freedom of religion. You know what it is? So the secular idea of freedom of religion is you can practice whatever you want.
Do whatever you want.
Right.
I'll tell you afterwards about it. One idea I've just heard of.
Okay.
After the recording.
Okay. What's the Jewish idea of freedom of religion? There is a Jewish idea of freedom of religion.
How do you serve God?
That's true. But the fact of the matter is, does Judaism believe in oppressing now the truth is that when Yoshua went into Eretz Yisrael, he basically told the people, get out, right? Follow the Shev Mitzvah B'nai Noach, or we're going to take care of you. Basically, we're going to kill you. Now, the point of the matter is in that regard, we're going to kill you. It's very, very interesting, okay? Because how do the people know about God? Okay, so the point is
They heard about it, obviously, because they heard of, there were people telling about Bnei Yisrael and about what God did for them.
Rachav, when the slaves stay with her and say,
Right.
we know all about the stories.
We heard that.
We heard what you did to Egypt, the most powerful nation in the world. We heard how you were sustained in the desert for 40 years with manna and this well that followed you. A little strange. Okay, we don't understand it. Okay, so the point is that we all, basically she said, we all know that God's on your side. Okay, so the big question that exists now is what idiot went to war against the Jewish people? Okay, like we're behind the wall now. Okay, we're all secure now. We're behind the wall. Excuse me, stupid. Are you really that stupid? I mean, that's really the problem. It's like, how stupid can you be? You think you're really going to defeat God? I mean, come on. And there's a lot of issues like that. I always like to tell the story of Izebel. Okay? You know, Achad comes back and tells Izebel what happened with Eliyahu and Har Carmel. Right? Okay? And the people at Har Carmel said, Hashem hu Elokim. That's where the phrase on Yom Kippur comes from. Hashem hu Elokim. Right? No doubt about it. Everyone got the message. Okay? Achav. Okay, comes back and says, Izebel, it's God. What does Izebel do? She gets a messenger and sends a messenger to Eliyahu and saying, this time tomorrow, you're the same place. You're going to be dead. Same place where my prophets are today. Excuse me, lady. Did you not get the message?
Whose team is he playing on?
Okay, hey, crazy? The fact is that it's unbelievable. So that's the same question you can ask over there. The point is that in that situation, you can understand Yeshua being told or wipe them off. What about today? If a person was practicing idolatry today, do you think we'd just go in and kill them?
Likely not.
We have a concept of Tinuk Shenishba. Now, whether Tinuk Shenishba applies to Noahites or not, different issue. I'm not going to deal with that. It's a whole big problem. But the point of the matter is from a halachic perspective, we have an idea, and I'm not using the literal time to say the concept of Tinuk, I'm using it as it's used in our world today, of people who are not brought up religious. They're not held accountable. So in a certain way, you have an idea of freedom of religion, not because you have a right to religion, because you are not held culpable for making a mistake. The point is, it's a very different concept. So the truth is that in a certain way, it's not really freedoms, but we understand that you may not be able to live up to your obligations because you don't know any better. That we can understand. But the point is, it really starts with the idea that at that point in time, you still got to use your head. The point is that people will tell you that the person's Nishma is still got to use his head. You know, you should start getting messages. You know, I don't mean messages from you know, if this is happening and this is happening and this is happening, maybe you should be able to sit there and say, you know something, maybe I should think about this. You know, but the fact and that's not so simple either. But the point is that really what it comes down to is, and I think it's an interesting idea. Torah does not really, I don't think Torah has a concept of rights in the secular sense. But it has a broader understanding of what it means to be human than exists in most people's minds. A human being, okay, as a creature of God, was created for a purpose. And that purpose was to be beneficial to that person, and for the person to find an actualization of the self that is right for that person. So the point is that, and you're saying, the Meshach Chob saying, you are supposed to say, Mikol Eitz Hagan Ochot Hocho. You're supposed to go out to the world and find a place for yourself in the world, okay? And actualize who you are in the world, okay? And part of that actualization, you know, includes finding benefit for yourself, because that's the way God created you, and those things which you find to be beneficial to yourself was created that way for God. So if you want to be a violinist, there's a reason God gave you the talent to be a violinist, and maybe and the desire. So maybe that's something to consider as you figure out what to do in the world. Okay? But it's not simply a right. It's a recognition of purpose. And that purpose then becomes further developed or further focused through the lessons of Torah, the lessons of halachic intuition, the idea of using seichel, in terms of reaching for yourself and trying to make it the best place for yourself and for the greater whole, which goes through processes from family to community to nation to humanity. So the ultimate ideal is when Shlomo Melech says, "A beit tefillah l'kol ha'amim," the idea is we want to come together to create a whole for humanity, and that's where you get concepts in terms of the Jewish people. There's a concept of community in terms of Kol Yisrael Raven Zelazeh. So there has to be development of ideas. The point of the matter is in a certain way, we should feel that we want everyone to have medical insurance. We want to care about everyone. It should be part of who we are. Okay? Avraham Avinu wanted to take care of it's interesting because I talk about Avraham Avinu. Did he want? I think he specifically the reason it's specifically focused on welfare on people traveling, because
They're in an endangered situation.
well, yes, but the fact of the matter is they're in an endangered situation because that had purpose. See, there's an interesting thing which I talk about. I was once listening to an As It Happens radio show here, and I think I told this story before, where there was this kid in England who I think he eventually became better, but he had cancer and he wanted to make it into the Guinness World Book of Records by having the most get well cards. So he put out this call to everyone sending get well cards. Okay, he started having to rent what do you call it?
There was something with the post office.
Well, it wasn't just the post office. He started having to rent, what do you call it? Like, what do you call big storehouses? Warehouses to keep all the get well cards. So finally they put out a notice that says, please don't send any more get well cards. So it just so happens that As It Happens was going to be interviewing this Catholic school board that arranged for everyone in their diocese, everyone in the Catholic school board, right, to send get well cards. So they were on the show and says, well, what's our plan? Well, we made up a plan tomorrow where every student and all our schools are going to have get well cards and send it off and so forth and so forth. Then what occurred was the guy let him talk about this, and the guy who organized this whole thing, he said, that's what we're going to do. So then the guy from, I don't think it was Robert Frost, says, okay, so what are you guys going to do now when they say we don't want any more get well cards? They go, what?
We have nowhere to put them.
They don't. No, didn't you see? They put out an announcement: no more get well cards. The guy was devastated. Like, what are we gonna do? And then the guy from As It Happens started comforting the other guy. He says, I'm sure don't worry. I'm sure there'll be another cause coming up. There'll be another tragedy. There'll be another cause coming up. So I'm sure you can find something else to do, right? Like that's why. So the point is if I have such a great desire to give tzedakah, I need a poor person. But maybe we should not want to have anyone poor, and you don't have to feel a great drive to give tzedakah. But the thing that's interesting,
they'll never cease.
Okay, so the argument is to never cease, but our ideal should be that it does cease. It does cease.
We're always striving towards that.
Right, but the point is that if you think Avraham Avinu is waiting for a poor person, because I need that poor person to feel good. No, that's why I point out that Avraham Avinu was looking for travelers, because travelers had a purpose in society, and people in that society understood that this was a challenge in society that was necessary in order to work within society. So he said, I want to help. These people are doing something that's necessary. They're involved. It's not a sad thing that they're involved in this traveling. It's a challenge which they have to do in order to be alive. So then Avraham Avinu can sit there and say, and I want to help them out, right? I'm not helping someone in need, which is a need I could wish that they weren't having. It was a need that was part of reality. Okay, that's why I like to point out by Avraham Avinu that he wanted to help out people.
He didn't run a B&B
What?
for tourists.
Well, no, well, he could have, yeah, he. But the point is, you didn't have tourists as easily. You had people who were trying to.
He was dealing with the import export.
But he wasn't just. Of course, he gave stucco. Of course, he gave to the poor. But the fact of the matter is, if there was no poor person who needed his help, he wouldn't be so sad. But the point is, he knew that there were people who traveling, and he wasn't able to people who could use his help, and for need. That's what I tried to point out. So, anyways, what I'm trying to say is that there's an idea of understanding. What I'm getting about this idea is a Halachic Bill of Rights. It's not rights in the secular sense, but there's an idea that we as human beings have a purpose, and part of that purpose is to develop ourselves. Part of that purpose is the Kodesh Baruch Hu who's created this world for us to benefit from it, and so forth and so forth. And we have an idea that we should strive towards that for ourselves, for others, and so forth. And in that regard, we it's not just about obligations of others upon us. It's upon us accepting what we want to do in life and accepting obligations to others, and so forth. And that's what really is so. And it also entails doing things with the mind. So when we talk about Bill of Rights, I do believe it's a Bill of Rights. We do have a concept of speech. Speech is not just freedom to say anything you want. It's the idea of being thoughtful in speech. You can't just blurt anything, but we should be people who can talk. You know, there's a classic story of the Chafetz Chaim where people ran into him. He wasn't a person who was not talkative. He did talk, but he knew what to say, and that's part of what we talk about in terms of our understanding of what we are supposed to do. It's acting with purpose. Anyways, I hope you found this interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.